say that this is a real pleasure for me to be able to interview Connie Orr. I grew up in Lakefield, and my parents were Bob and Eileen McCracken, and when I look back at my youth, all the things that happened as I grew up, Connie was always a part of that. So it's really exciting to go back beyond that, and I might even find out something about my dad. Apparently he went to school with Connie, so there may be surprises I didn't know about before.
Helen Thompson, Ken Morris.
So
we were all in the same grade.
That's great. So what we're going to do is, we're going to do a timeline where we're going to start and give you a picture of what Lakefield would have been like in the 1920s when Connie was young. And we'll get an idea of the layout of the village, what sorts of stores there were, and then we're going to talk about public school days and what happened then, and then high school days. Not just school time, we want to know all the action that took place after the school hours. So Connie, tell us what you remember about Lakefield in general for stores in the early days.
Our business section in Lakefield was Queen Street. And when you came up Albert Street from my house, I lived in the same house down on the corner of Albert and Regent all my life. The one thing I remember early, Leonard's had a gas pump right on the sidewalk as you come out the store. They were the first gas pump in Lakefield, I think. Do you remember that, Cora?
So I hadn't thought of it, but I think I do remember.
Yeah, it was, and that's where the cars had to come and get gas. And the two main stores, you went farther up the street, Bell Telephone. First it was in the little place on the front street, but before it was in the back of Tanner's drugstore, the Bell Telephone. And I remember, during the war, a lot of the kids were telephone operators. And we used to hang out at the front of it till we saw Mr. Tanner coming, and then everybody disappeared. Yeah. And farther on up the street was Commercial Hotel. We always got an ice cream cone once a week at Nielsen's. And but the two main stores happened to be Spence's and Porter's. And I don't know how many of you remember, but our one big thing when we were small, if we got a cent, we would go to Porter's to buy hard mixtures, but we looked at all the people over because a couple of the men were pretty tight to give me a candy, so we wouldn't spend our cent if they were there. And in those days, Porters made their own bread, and Mike Runmaker worked there, and he would go around in the morning and take orders, and then he would deliver it the next morning. And many's the time we got warm bread after Mike had been delivering groceries. And but I can still see getting down off those steps of Porter's because we weren't going to buy our candies for that day. Didn't get enough for it. Then up at Spence's, who was it? And the two Mr. Spence's, George and Percy, and Bertie Johnson worked there, and Fred Runmaker delivered for Spence's. And that was our big do. One other thing I remember, usually we went home down this street, but one day I had, I don't know, for some reason I went home down the front street and ended up, remember the bushel baskets that used to be outside at the front of the store? Well, I took home a handful of something, haven't a clue what it was, terrible tasting stuff. And my mother was just flabbergasted me carrying it. Back we go with this horrible stuff he couldn't eat anyway. And apologized, and I don't know whether I paid for it or not, but boy, don't ever pick things out of a bushel basket. And what else went on the front street?
Connie, tell us about the dairies. How many
Oh,
dairies?
there were 4 dairies in Lakefield. Lakefield Dairy with George Graham and Charlie Hunter. And Perth Darling had a dairy. Ken told me one summer he worked for them. And who else besides Perth Darling? Oh, Herb Kemp had a dairy. And Clarence Coon. There were 4 dairies in Lakefield at one time.
Well, I think at that time, Connie, wasn't the Lakefield Dairy the Lakefield Creamery? And
Yeah,
just
but
made the
they-
butter. They didn't do the
Didn't they-
milk. Not
oh.
then.
Later on they did.
Yes.
Jack Blakely one time had
Yes, yes, yes.
I don't
a
remember
milk
him
right.
doing. But Perth lived right across from us, you know. And, oh, well, about that time, Mr. Blake came to Lakefield with a Boca, no, it wasn't a Boca store, in where the doctors are now. That's where Mr. Blake started his grocery store.
Connie, you mentioned about the doctors. Who were some of the doctors at that time?
Well, there would be Dr. Alec Fraser and his dad, and Dr. Smith, and Dr. Moore. Who else?
Where were you born?
The old Nickel Hospital, either.
And what happened when you had to get your tonsils out?
I had them out in our kitchen table. when Dr. Cragg went through Lakefield, he spent a whole day in Lakefield operating on people. And Cora, I think, you know, it's a long time ago, I think it was Beatty Junkins had hers taken out the same day as I did at our place because they didn't have electricity. But what really irked me, my sister Jean was going to Chapels for dinner, and here I was, and couldn't have anything to eat. We had a great time with the Chapel girls. We were the same age, and we played ball down about where Brown's hairdressing is now, and with the liquor store and the Legion and all those places. That was a great big field. We played ball there. And Mrs. Chapel always sent George down to bring Elsie and Alice home to do the dishes. And Elsie and Jean have a little fight, and she would go home and say, and nobody ever brings the Orr girls home, they don't have to do dishes. And that, from then on, he brought us home too. We had a lot of kids on our corner, and everybody waited for Miss Kidd to walk to school with. The only thing Miss Kidd didn't really do, Miss Kidd never went through the swamp. And we never got to school in time unless we went through the swamp, you know. It was wonderful. And I can remember Veronica McFadden. Oh, my mother would never buy us rubber boots. I never had a pair of rubber boots. She said you just try to go over the top of them, so what have you. So we'd get in, especially in the spring, and go through the swamp, and you have to jump the creek. And the water must have been fairly deep then, because Veronica McFadden, who wasn't as big as I was, attempted to drop me going across the creek. And it was going, you know, on that road that goes up past Dennis. That's where we went. Oh, lots of times. And so if you went with the teacher, you had to go all the way around the sidewalk. And what do I remember about? Oh, the one thing I remember about the school. Cora, do you remember when they had the toboggan slide there?
Yes.
Remember? It wasn't there very long when we went, but we had, and a couple of the people had their legs broken, and that's why it was torn down.
Well, I remember the slide.
Yeah.
And it went through, and they built a laneway down at the back of Stenner's house, and it would go on down that great big drop, and the boys put earth in there, and it would jump. Oh, no wonder they tore it down. But we thought that was wonderful.
Connie, tell us about public school. Where was it, and do you remember any of the teachers?
Oh, yes. Well, Miss Kidd was always there. Public school, well, the whole school was where the senior citizens buildings, and that whole area was school ground. Oh, we had a lovely time in there. And Miss Kidd, Eva Hill was my next, Mel's wife, you know, she was Harry Hill's sister.
There was a Miss Payne.
Miss Payne and Harry Wanamaker and Miss Kennedy. Yeah, Miss Kennedy, she tried to be gruff and what have you, but she had one finger, and it was better than any ruler she had. Boy, if she hit you with this finger, you know. But she was a very nice lady and a very good teacher. She was senior third. Mr. Chapman was the principal. Miss Payne was another one of our teachers. Harry Wanamaker. We had some great.
Now, you were telling me that while you were about that age in public school, there were some things that you would do with your family too, and you used to go on sleigh rides out to visit people?
Oh, well, we had relatives out at Gilchrist Park, the Lloyds, and you know how your mother and my mother always expected company on Sunday. They always had company on Sunday. So we really didn't have a big family car. My dad had an old trucker car that he went to work in. And anyway, somebody must have come along this one Sunday and said, let's go for a ride. And we said, okay. And we went out to Uncle Bob Lloyd, who just lived north of Gilchrist Park. And we got out there, and there was nobody home. But you know, our mothers always had food in case company came on Sunday. And we walked around the place, had a nice brick farmhouse, walked around, and the side door was locked, and I think the woodshed door was locked. But the side door on the far side was open, and people didn't lock their houses up in those days. So we went in, and Aunt Cora, I guess, had everything ready. So they were getting even with my uncle. I don't know for what, but we set the table, and we had our supper, and did the dishes, and left a note, and they didn't know what ages he was there, and they, that was wonderful.
Well, it sounded like you had fun going on the sleigh, and you said that you would heat bricks to keep you warm. And who had the horse and sleigh?
Oh, my grandpa loved it. And one Christmas we went out there, which was the same place, and it was cold, and did we used to have buffalo blankets or something, these great big heavy, well, we had one of those. But anyway, and I remember they put, now I think it was heated bricks they had in the bottom, back of the bottom of the sleigh, and we went out there and had a really wonderful time. But Jean cried the whole day, my sister Jean, because she got a carriage for Christmas and there wasn't room to take. So she had to leave her carriage at home. But those are the things I remember we did, and
In public school, yeah. You mentioned also that it was pretty exciting for you to go and visit the neighbors who had one of the first radios.
oh, yes. One Christmas chapel, the first time I saw a radio, it was one of the ones with earphones, you know, and we were at chapels. Well, chapels had anything, we had to go and see it, so we shared this. You heard one word and then it was, you lost your turn and somebody else. But the first radio I ever remember seeing was at chapel. And our neighbors, we had a few neighbors that didn't have any children. And was it ever great to get down to their house because there was lots of children around our corner. And when new people came along, we sure didn't want them visiting our friends, you know. And we played a lot of ball down at the end of the street, and kids from all over the corner. Oh, and another time, Jean and I came home from school with a sign on the door, scarlet fever. What did we do? We just went over to Kelly's and stayed, you know.
So those were the days when the houses were
The
quarantined.
quarantine, yeah.
Yeah, you sure would. Well, let's find out what happened when you were in high school. Where was the high school?
Well, the back 5 rooms of the public school. And we had 2 rooms upstairs and 2 rooms down. And somebody told me Mr. Minchell was coming, but I don't see him yet. One of our teachers are living in Lakefield now. He was a science teacher. We had a lot of people who disrupted things in school, Ken Morris. Oh, yeah.
Who was your principal?
Mr. Harvey. What was I going to tell you about Mr. Harvey?
Well, you had mentioned that you had a special day off, the high school did, for the funeral of Mr.
Dr. Mackenzie's funeral. And we had because his granddaughters, when 3 of them were in Lakefield High School when Dr. Mackenzie died, we were given the morning off to go to Dr. Mackenzie's funeral at St. John's Church. And we went, and it was a Friday morning, and we all agreed on this, that we wouldn't go to church or go to school in the afternoon. So we all took the afternoon off except the Wong kids. And on Monday morning, the ceiling fell in. Where were you? And I didn't give you time off. And oh, the fever.
What happened to his glasses?
He said, I'll teach you a lesson. He had his glasses in his hand and broke his glasses and couldn't see. And he sent George Tanner down to Mr. Tanner to get his glasses fixed because he couldn't see a thing. It was wonderful. We really had a good time at school. We didn't think we did, but we sure did. And
You had a special day that you went to Toronto. Tell us about that day when the school went to see the King.
I was on that.
King and Queen were here in 39. And I don't know why there weren't any buses, but anyway, it was a train and we had to go to Peterborough to catch the train.
To go to Toronto.
Mm-hmm. So we went and we got there, and I don't know, it was on the west side of Toronto. I don't know where it was. I think it was
Parkdale Station.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was and we were there all day, and then we got on the train coming home. And John, what happened? We got home at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Something went wrong with the trains. That is that they didn't have enough, or some of the trains without anybody on them.
Oh, it was, and you know, the kids had pulled down the sleeper things,
Yeah.
and it went on all night. And my dad, I don't know how we got down there in the morning, but my dad waited all night in Peterborough at the station to pick us up when we got home. And we just got home, and Miss Dunn had a little coupe car with a rumble seat in it.
Mhm.
I bet there were 10 of us in this rumble seat. We had really had a great time.
Now, you mentioned, Connie, that a few students like to cause mischief. And what did Mr. Harvey do with one particular student by doing something with his desk? He was going to
Oh, the person that sat in the front seat. Do you remember sitting in the front seat, Ken? But it wasn't really as much his fault, I think, as it was Don Smith. And Don, you couldn't get your desk open, and we had those, one-seater things with the drawer underneath them. And Mr. Harvey would say, "Open your desk drawer, Morris." And he would, and Ken Morris, Don Smith had put well, I don't think there was anything in it but tea maybe, but a liquor bottle in his desk. And Ken was trying to get this, and we were all just waiting until they...
So he pushed somebody else's desk in the room around
Oh,
town?
yeah. Do you remember the Arthur family? They lived across the bridge, and there was a big family of boys. You do.
What was their name?
Arthurs.
Oh, Ray and Clinton and
Yeah,
Basil.
the whole family
Yeah,
of boys.
Rita.
And I don't know what it was Bun Arthur's, what he was doing this day, but Mr. Harvey was a big man, 6'3" or 6'4", and he could handle you quite well if you wanted to. And I don't know what had gone on, but Mr. Harvey went behind him at the window at the back of the room and pushed his desk. We thought it was going right through the door. Only Bun got his feet up and hit the doorway with his feet. Oh,
Here you go flying through it. Now, did you have sports teams for the school at that time in high school? Like hockey or football?
yes, but I don't remember. They had a field where Redpath School is now. That was it. And we had some, and this must have been around the time of the war, because we had some really good
Athletes?
we sure did. It was the time of Charlie Tanner and let me see, Woody Moore and Joe Blewett, huh?
Chuck Birch.
Yeah. Well, no, Chuck Birch was maybe not.
They could really show up.
Yes, they could. And that, for years, that was the playground for high school. Was just back of where the Ridpath School is now.
Now, you said you did there was skating. Where was the skating arena besides the outdoor rinks that you had?
Well, it was down on Colburn Street, back of the mill, and that's where the curling rink was and the skating rink. And we didn't get there very often. We skated more at the side of Sharon's, that always filled with water. We skated there, and the kids used to catch the back of the sleds when they were going up to the mill. Oh.
You also mentioned that there were other interest groups like Scouts and Cadet Corps. Was that in part of the school program, or?
No, that was after that. We had Cubs and Scouts. And Ken Jacobs was a great worker for the Scouts. And Tom...
Atkinson?
No. Well, Tom Atkinson was... Tom Payton was one of the leaders. And there were 4 Cub packs in Lakefield in those days. Each church had one. And...
you told me some little stories about the dogs that were in the neighborhood, too.
Some of these things I shouldn't have told you.
Sounded good to me. Lots of fun.
Oh, yes. Really, I enjoyed every minute I had at school.
What about your dog, Bingo?
No, that Bingo wasn't. Everybody had a dog in those days. Everybody. And this past week, everybody, with the first dog they mentioned was Don Hendren's dog. The well-behaved, he was so great. Cora, what was it Don built for him and used to take him out in the water?
Oh, it was a surfboard,
Yeah.
and he taught him to ride on the dog was so obedient. If Don told him to sit, wherever he was sitting, he sat until he was told that he could get up. And so he taught him to ride on the surfboard. And he would go along, it would go on indefinitely, and the dog never got in the water. He'd come back and Don would stop at the wharf and stop the surfboard right there, and the dog would jump off.
Oh, yeah, and that was the first dog they mentioned. But Birches had a little dog, and it would get out at night. And when Birch would go to bed, and about 11 o'clock, she'd come to the window and say, "Is that you, Bingo Birch?" They called him Bingo, and she'd go, "Arf!" She'd come down and pat me, and he had to stay out till they had this little session every night. And oh, who else? We had a dog too, and I'm considerably older than my brother, and I had started to work about the time he started school. So he got a good many ice cream cones, but this dog we had went with you to get the ice cream, and he'd stay right there till you bought him an ice cream too. He'd love ice cream.
I should finish the story about that surfboarding dog. Nick Nichols, he lived over in the park, and he took a picture of it.
I think Dad has it in his scrapbook.
And it made its way to California. It was shown in a paper, a daily paper, and the picture of this dog surfboarding way up in Canada. So it got around.
Oh, and there's something else I want to tell you people is quite interesting.
Jimmy Hedden's dog that he used to harness.
Oh, yeah, the little chows.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like it. The other day, I was in the post office. If you want to get caught up in the news, go to the post office and talk to the people. Anyway, Phil Holland came in. So Phil, he is the oldest practicing person in the store business in Lakefield now.
Mm-hmm.
But I said to him, "Is your mother still living?" And he said, "Yes, she is, Connie. She's in a nursing home, but she's really quite well for her age." Do you know how old Mrs. Holland is? 103. And so I thought that was interesting. And the Hollands had been in business in Lakefield for a long time. And when he moved his store to Peterborough, and we were working in Peterborough, if you wanted, I was working at GE at the time, if you wanted anything, Mr. Holland, as long as you were from Lakefield, he'd let you have it.
You showed me a picture when you were standing outside with some friends, and it was near the front street, but in the background there was a band shell. Where was the band shell?
Down in Memorial Park.
And did they have a local band that used to play there?
Mr. Medill,
Mm-hmm.
didn't it?
Could I tell you about
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's what I want to see. I knew you
Well, the
people.
band on exhibition day, the band always marched from, I imagine they met up here at the dock someplace, and they marched down the main street and turned the corner, went to the fairgrounds. And this day, Mr. Medill was the leader, and he played the trumpet. All right, he played the trumpet. I hope I get through this. You know when they're playing the trombone. They're so busy moving this thing. back and forth, and the music is up here. Singing the music and operating this instrument. They got down to the post office corner. Everybody else turned.
Well, they know where he was because they hear him play.
To catch up with them.
Like a two-piece band.
Do you remember the time that, oh, well, one person you'll never forget is Colin Campbell. Remember the time Colin Campbell climbed the top of the cement stack?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And my grandmother was babysitting them. They had gone, Dr. Campbell and Mrs. Campbell had gone somewhere, and they'd left Colin for the weekend with Grandma. And he was on one of those big silos,
Yeah.
I think. And he just backed up, and well, there wasn't anything there, except all the way down. Ooh.
Well, I babysat him a few times too. His mother and dad rented Warren Payne's house, and Warren was up in Apsley. He was in a store up in Apsley for a while. And you know what he did? He would get matches and throw them under the dining room table, and it had a lace tablecloth. Oh, he was a terror. He was a terror. And
You mentioned somebody broke their leg where the turnaround area was for the
oh yeah,
train.
you see, we've had a busy week since.
Yeah.
There was a turntable for the train engine, and it was Doris O'Neill, and they lived over on Concession Street. There was Garney O'Neill, and but they used to go down there, and well, they were only a half a block from it. They used to go down and play on this turntable when they were kids. And she caught her leg somehow in it. She nearly lost her leg. I can remember. But that's where the kids played, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned that you used to have lots of fun with the Sunday school picnics, that
Oh,
they'd go on a boat ride, would they?
Oh, what other? Yeah, we used to take the boat up to Crow's Landing. And oh, that was a big do in the summertime to get a boat ride. But this one particular time, my sister Jean, the whole family gets around. And my sister Jean, just as we had landed, and you know, there was a plank from the boat over to she fell in. And she would have drowned if it hadn't been for Walter Spence jumped in to save her. But that was a big do, our Sunday school picnic, when we went out. And one year we went down over the lip lock. We didn't do that very often.
Now, Connie, something you talked to me about, which I found really fascinating, was this farm service force that happened. And first of all, what I thought was really great was how delightful you were. You were so delighted you could be part of this because you were going to miss exams. How did that work?
Well, this got to May, and this came out in 1942, that if you went and worked for the Farm Service Force, you didn't have to write your departmental exams. And Helen, you know the fifth form departmental exams. We couldn't let it go any farther. And it got to near the end of May, and we still hadn't heard from them. And we thought, oh, we're going to have to write those darn old exams. But about 3 days before the limit was up, we got word that we could go to farm service camp. And we went. And we were there, we went the end of May, and we came home the second week in September.
Where was it?
At where?
Near Oakville?
The Oakville, yeah.
Number 2 highway.
And we went to it was a wonderful thing.
So you went there to work on a farm, but this would
It
have
wasn't
been...
it wasn't just a farm, wherever they needed you. You know what we did the first day we were there, or I did, where I was? I went out and cut asparagus, and those were the days you bent over, you didn't have any car. But we were there 13 weeks, and I gained 30 pounds.
Now, this would be at a time when a lot of the men would be at war, would they?
Oh, yeah,
So
42.
they really needed you there to help.
Mhm.
And what sort of living conditions did you have?
Well, it was
Like a big lodge, like I did?
Yeah, a lodge with the individual cabins back there, and there were all kinds of kids. Helen and I, Pauline Butcher was living in Lakefield then, she was there. Betty Lake and John Pearson's wife, Helen Pearson, and we had 2 girls. One was from one of the South Islands, and she was going to University of Toronto, and she didn't go home for the summer. And the other girl was from Western Ontario, and the food was tremendous. And I was never an outside girl, you know. I gained all this weight, and I was as black as your boot, but we prayed for a rainy day because we'd have the day off. And I must go and get my sweater and show you.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd get out. And it was only legal, that was the year it was legal to hitchhike. That was the first time for girls hitchhiking was legal because there was no other way to get around. So we prayed it rained. And then we could catch the bus and we'd go to Toronto if we had money, or Oakville, or, it was just wonderful. But anyway, I still got my sweater to show. Have you got yours? It's pretty ratty, but I'll show you, It had something from 1942. And there it is.
Look at the flag on it.
Yeah.
He was sponsored by the Department of Agriculture.
Yes, it was.
And they didn't have enough, so many men had gone into the services and they needed them to pick
I'll
up.
just hold that so they can see it then.
There must have been over 100 girls in
Yeah.
the camp. I'm surprised they still have that, Connie.
Well, I went on a look at the back of it. But we had a wonderful time, and the meals were excellent. And the people in charge were just wonderful people.
You'd mentioned a couple of other people that, when you'd gone to high school, that were also quite good at either story writing or had special talents,
Oh, yeah.
besides the mischief.
The help.
Other choices, well, they didn't have any choices, but 2 people that would have done really, really well in the out in the world of business was Tom Junkins and Fred Hudson. They were both super people. They'd been, what would they end up being, John, do you think? But they were really excellent.
Well, I read materials that they both had, that they both wrote when they were in high school, or at least Tom Junkins is Kay Mose Junkins used to work for my grandmother and grandfather, as I did too, and he used to write poetry. He was overseas and send it over, and she often read it to us, and it was a wonderful poem.
Well, they were really sharp, but that was wartime, and well, they
And
didn't.
well, they both were products of the Depression, followed by the war.
Uh-huh.
And if those two events hadn't came, those boys could easily have gone through an honors English program at university. Connie, in a few minutes I'll go over and get it.
No,
No,
you
but
can do another program.
no, but I meant what I brought here.
Oh, sure.
30 years before my grandfather Brown died, Fred Hudson wrote his obituary as a composition for high school, and it's called The Day Herb Brown Died. 30 years before the event. I found it, I photocopied it, and I want you people can have a copy of it.
But they were just
Yeah.
super people.
Tom Junkin, he never had any training, but he did books for about 3 businesses in the area here. And he did their books in accounting and did their
Yep.
tax returns and
Yep.
everything. And I said, "Where'd you learn this?" And he said, "I never learned it." And he said, "I just did it." And he was extremely intelligent man,
Oh, yes, he
amazingly
was.
intelligent.
Then you said the Wong children were,
Well,
seemed to
no
be.
matter what, you always were in the class with the moms. There was George and Mary and Lily and Rosie.
Hastings and Jesse.
They were really smart kids. And nice,
Nice kids.
really nice kids.
What did their people do for a living?
Well, they had just come to Lakefield and opened a restaurant. Well, when the Depression came, they were out of the restaurant. They lived, for years, they lived up on Bishop Street. There used to be a red house up there, and that's where they lived for years, but they were really very clever kids.
You were,
George went worked at CG for years. Don't you remember?
Yeah, I worked with
Yeah.
you mentioned Prospect Street, because I've been asking you about the horses and sleighs that people were using, and I had wondered where all these horses were kept. So you were describing to me what the properties looked like up near Prospect Street.
Well, they all had big lots that went back, but everybody, or nearly everybody, they had a car, and they had a horse, and they had chickens, and I think some of them had a cow. So there was all in these big lots, and they would run right back to Rolliston Street. And that's how come those 2 streets are so deep. Their properties were there.
So Connie, when you look back from all the different things that you've talked about, what's the one thing that really sticks out in your mind the most? What was your favorite?
Well, how can you say that?
That's right. There's so many good memories.
There weren't. Lakefield and school, and the next thing was GE. I left, that was in 42. We went to Foreign Service camp, and we didn't get back till after Labor Day, that September. And before the end of September, I went to work at GE. Those are the only 2 places, I ever worked, but I enjoyed every bit of it at both places. Very, very nice people.
Well, looking at all your pictures you have at your house, you were sure a busy lady. And you're always going somewhere. I love the old cars where you would be piling into them and going out west or some other adventure.
Well, but I think we grew up that summer at farm camp because we met a lot of different people, and it was really a wonderful experience.
How many years were you with GE?
Let me see, 42 years. Went in, started in 42 and retired in 84.
And been busy ever since.
So,
You just don't stop going.
well, yes, I do.
Oh, well, it's
I fall asleep in the chair, I've got to that stage.
clear.
Connie, how would you get from here to Peterborough to
Oh,
work?
but Oh, I must tell you about this. There was a couple that lived on George Charlton's house, you know, back of the school. And this man, I think he was English. Periodically, I would miss the bus, and I would get out at our old post office and hitchhike. Now, you had to be right there. You knew who would pick you up, like Eldred Bell and the Hockaday boy, and there was somebody else. But anyway, there was this couple that lived at George Charlton's house, and this man, he had a reputation, he never picked anybody up. And I said one day to somebody, well, you're crazy because he picked me up. And they said, but he doesn't pick anybody up. And they said, how in the world did you ever get him to stop and pick you up? But when I think all about it, he either had to pick me up or run me over. Oh, and I'll tell you, somebody else that always stopped and picked you up if you missed the bus, which I did periodically, was Gordon K. Fraser. He'd be going to Ottawa. He was our member of Parliament. And then he'd say, how are you? Did you have your breakfast, dear? I'd say, yes, I had my breakfast.
Did he take you to the plant?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, yes, he did.
You really wanted your vote.
Did George Hutt drive in the bus?
Jim Reed, mostly.
Did George Hutt go for years?
Yeah, he goes
Yes,
on.
he did, but the work bus, Jim Reed drove it more often than George. But one time, do you remember the time that the train came through and hit the bus about on Water Street? You know where the train used to cross the tracks there?
Yeah.
Well, you were there a long time too, Jim.
Yeah, pretty long.
Yeah.
41 years.
41, were you?
Well, Connie,
It was a good life, let me tell you.
yes, you sure
Tell us
had a
about
busy
your family, your immediate family.
Well, Jean lives at the Maple, across from the Maple. And my sister Winnie died, you know, a 3 years ago with cancer. She lives in Bancroft. And my sister Florence is in Saskatchewan, Maple Creek. And my brother died with cancer 3 years ago.
That was Murray.
Mm-hmm. But when I think of all the kids that were raised down around our corner, the Calgarys and the Birches and the
Darling.
Darling boys,
Yeah.
Lures.
and the Sabatina boys.
Mhm.
Oh, and Mrs. Sabatina had two sons who went to the States to live. No, it wasn't Louis. It was Philip and somebody else. But anyway, and her people, you know. But she wouldn't let her family write her letters. She couldn't read and write English. But she wouldn't let them write her letters to her sons. She wasn't going to let them know. So my mother, she always came up and my mother wrote all her letters for her. And once in a while then she'd come up and make spaghetti for us too. And we never had money, or there were no restaurants to go to in wartime. But I thought, what did we do? But we used to go and visit the people who didn't have any children. Well, that was better than going to any restaurant you ever saw. And I remember there was a family from the Smithburg? No. Not Gretcheners. No.
Smith,
No.
Mendel Smith?
Yeah, well, we used to go there. We loved going there. They lived where Mrs. Samus lived. And, no, who am I thinking of? And there were two old bachelors lived in the house where Perth Hill lived, you know, beside Ms. Bird's there. And all I can remember is going to their house, if we could get away to some of these places, you know, we'd have brown sugar sandwiches. You ever have brown sugar sandwiches? We didn't get in there very often. Oh, something else. The United Church and the Baptist Church both had good car yards where they kept cars. And ours was right down from where the new, well, it's not new anymore. Yeah, where the cupboard is. And they, before they, no, used to be a white house there, and it was torn down. And that's when, who?
Hudson's lived there.
Yeah, Hudson's lived there in the,
It was mostly horses, teams of horses. that
Yeah,
lived there.
it was a livery barn.
yeah, but.
Driving.
Driving shed, that's right.
But I think that's where every kid had their first smoke, too.
Yeah, you also mentioned that when you were going to high school, that a lot of the students came in from the surrounding areas and boarded during the week.
They didn't only board, they came in on, in fact, our present reeve of this, whatever we are now.
Municipality, Birdman.
Yeah, Birdman, he and his family came to Lakefield High School. They went to Lakefield High School. And they would come over in some kind of a wagon
Horse and buggy or
or horse
sleigh?
and buggy and horse and wagon or horse and sleigh from Lake Shimon to Lakefield every morning and back again. And a lot of kids did it from Durham. Yeah, on the ladies, and or a horse, but also some of them just roomed and got their own meals. They'd come in on Monday morning and stay till Friday night and got their own meal. We have no idea, you know. And the townsgirls from Durham, and the Mohers, and
The Boltons from
yeah.
back in Burley Falls?
Oh, and also Sawyer's Creek was a good old place.
Oh, yeah.
Used to have.
Now, Neil.
I'll go along with it.
Also, I remember Winnie and Florence were in this. This wasn't my time. That Winnie and Florence and the whole gang of kids went to Stan Richardson's and took his corn. And Mr. Samus made you go to the police station and pay 50 cents for
Cow corn too.
Well, oh, was my mother ever discussed with my two sisters, but they were in on it. But they stole all this corn and then they had to pay 50 cents each.
Connie, who lived down in the double house where the apartments are now, where Orville Moore's mother lived?
Oh.
Mrs. Ed Moore. Who lived?
Calvary's lived in the other side.
In one house?
Yeah.
Okay.
And who else lived in it? There was
And had the Moores lived there for a long period of time?
quite a while, yeah.
Okay, Hazel and Orville and the rest?
Evelyn,
Yes.
Evelyn Moore's bottles for Starling when he had the milk truck.
Okay.
And who else? But the Calvarys lived on the other side.
Okay.
And we had lots of kids down around our corner. Well, you people lived up on Bishop Street.
We moved frequently. Well, no, we lived in, anyway, we lived in a number of places.
Well,
When you had 7 children, and your father was away in the army, it didn't take us kids long to go through a house. We'd just get nicely settled, we'd get our eviction notice.
but we sure had, well, I suppose suppose we had our fights, but we,
Well, the Birches were a remarkable family, really.
yes, they were. Oh, and I remember the first day of the war, I was going out to catch the bus, to go up to the post office to catch the bus, and Mrs. Birch came to her front door and said to me, Connie, it started. She said they've invaded France. And she was the first person to tell me that in the morning. She must have been up really early. But here was Chuck and Jack, you see, in uniform. And then after the war in France or whatever, the Navy men were all home on leave because they were getting ready to go to Japan when that war was called off.
Yeah.
But all the fellows that were in the Navy were home on leave.
Be in the neighborhood. Sorry about that.
It didn't bring you.
No. Well, Connie,
Oh,
you've really given us lots and lots of memories.
well, and the funny thing is, they still come and see. I see Doug Darling 2 or 3 times a year, and the people that drop in. I'll tell you, somebody else is that's been awfully sick is Bill Giraldi. You know, he's lost part of his tongue. He had cancer in it. Terrible thing.
So, have you got any other little memories, or maybe we'll have you another day, and we'll get some more memories going.
Well, what I should do is bring some of those old snaps.
Sure.
That would be good.
But we really had a good time at school.
Mm-hmm.
There were times, I suppose, I didn't think so. But, no, we had good neighbors and, oh! I sat here long enough. What's the street that Don Hurl, you live on? Chippewa Avenue. There are 3 boys that from their street that were killed overseas. There was
Jack Morrison, Marky Bully,
Marky Bully, Jack Morrison, and Doug Burrows.
Bernard Burrows.
Bernard Burrows. And who else? Oh, the other one. 3 weeks from the time he was home on his last leave, he was dead, and that was
Ducky McFadden?
Bernie McFadden, who we called Kentucky. That's right. And he got called Kentucky because we always called that side of the bridge Kentucky. No, you're just looking for trouble. There you go. But we did, and it didn't seem. And we have a memorial in our church in memory of the people from our church that were killed in Second World War. But I can remember this Chucky McFadden. He wasn't a very big fellow, and I think it was less than 3 weeks from the time he was home he was dead. The invasion had started.
Well, Connie, thank you so much for sharing your memories
Well, I'm
today.
glad you were here.
Well,
Just wonderful
I think we'll
time.
have to have a time again, and we'll go and discuss some more. But
Round
thank
2.
you so much.
Round 2.
Yeah. This is really great. I like the picture of the flag.
You know, you can cut the shield out and put it on a new put it on a new t-shirt.
That's good, thanks.
Connie, you can take that off.
You were afraid of
Put it on another
Well, it
t-shirt.
wouldn't be me.
Maybe not.
For your organization of this event, it was really a nice evening and very fulfilling. That concludes our evening, and thank you for coming. Always welcome to attend our meetings. We hope to have interesting speakers. We're getting our newsletter out, and I want to thank everybody for the tedious hard work in writing up one short little paragraph and giving it to them. You've been a big help.